My girlfriend said her ex was coming back for a few days. Then I came home to my stuff outside. So I left one envelope on her car and walked away. I'm 27. My girlfriend Tessa is 26. We've been together a little over 2 years. We moved into a rental townhouse together last spring. It's a basic place, 2 bedrooms, a tiny back patio, close to her job, and not far from my commute. It wasn't a dream home situation. It was a practical one. And at work, we split rent, we split groceries, we split the pet stuff for her cat. We did the normal couple routine, weeknight dinners, weekend errands, arguing about laundry, making up, moving on. Tessa's always had one topic that made things weird. Her ex, Nolan, they dated for 4 years. They broke up about 8 months before I met her, the way she described it. It was one of those long, slow breakups where they were roommates for months before they finally admitted they didn't like each other anymore. She said he was controlling. She said he always had some opinion about what she wore and who she talked to. She said he was the type to disappear for a day, then come back acting like nothing happened. She also said he was the kind of person who didn't take no well, even after a breakup. I didn't press too hard because it felt like her story to tell at her pace. She didn't talk about it much in the beginning. Then later it started popping up in small ways, like she'd get a text, glance at it, lock her phone, and suddenly be in a bad mood. Or she'd mention that he still had some of her stuff. Or she'd say he was trying to get her to meet up to clear the air. The last time he came up before everything happened, it was a Tuesday night. Tessa was sitting at the kitchen island scrolling, not eating her dinner, and she said, "Nolan's coming back to town for a few days." I looked up like, coming back from where? She said, Arizona. He moved there after the breakup. He's been there for work. He's got a project ending. He wants to come grab a few things he left at his cousin's place. And he asked if he could stay here for a few days. I said no. Not raised voice no. Not dramatic no. Just no, like the answer was obvious. She made a face and said, "Don't do that." I said, "Do what?" She said, "Don't be one of those guys who can't handle an ex being in the same room." I told her I could handle an ex being in the same room. I couldn't handle her ex sleeping in our house. There's a difference. She said it'd only be for a few days. He'd take the couch. He'd be out most of the time, and it would be easier than him spending money on a hotel. And she didn't want to start something because if she said no, he'd make it a whole issue, and she didn't have the energy for it. I said, "So your plan is to say yes because you don't want to deal with him?" She said, "It's not like that. It's just temporary, and he's not some stranger. He's someone she used to live with. He knows how to act." I reminded her of every story she told me about him not knowing how to act. She said he's grown up, and besides, it's her place too, and she's not going to be told who could be on the couch. I kept my voice even and said, "It's my place too, and I'm telling you right now, if he stays here, I'm not staying here, and I'm not going to pretend that's normal." She rolled her eyes and said, "Fine, I'll tell him no. Are you happy now?" I said, "I'm not trying to win a fight. I'm trying to keep our home from turning into some weird situation." And I asked her to show me the message where he asked. She said it was a phone call. I said, "Okay, then show me the call log." She stared at me like I was accusing her of something, then said, "I'm not doing this. I'm not being interrogated." He asked. I said I'd think about it. That's all. We didn't resolve it that night. She went to bed early. I stayed up cleaning the kitchen and try not to spin out about it. The next day, she acted normal, like it was a minor thing, and I was making it bigger. She kissed me before work. She sent a couple funny texts. She asked if I'd pick up cat food on my way home. Then, Thursday afternoon, she texted, "Nolan's flight lands tonight. He's going to crash here Friday through Monday. Please don't make this a thing. I promise it's just a few nights." I read it at my desk and felt my stomach drop. I called her. She didn't answer. I texted back, "No, absolutely not. I'm serious." And she replied, "I already told him yes. He doesn't have anywhere else. You could be mature for once." That was the moment it became clear she wasn't asking me. She was informing me. I left work early. I drove home. And I practiced what I was going to say. Not a speech, just a clear line. It's either him or me because I'm not sharing a roof with her ex like it's a normal couple compromise. When I pulled onto our street, I saw my own stuff on the curb. Not a bag, not a box, my stuff, a pile of it. My suitcase, my backpack, a laundry basket, a couple of my shoes, a framed photo from my desk, and a plastic storage bin with the label I'd written on it, "Winter." For a second, I thought we'd been robbed and someone dumped it. Then I saw the way it was arranged, like someone had carried things out and set them down in a hurry, not thrown them. I parked and walked up fast, and my key didn't work. I tried again, and the deadbolt didn't budge. I knocked, no answer. I rang the doorbell, no answer. I checked my phone, and I had a text from Tessa that came in 10 minutes before I pulled up. "I need space. Nolan's here. Please don't come in and cause a scene. Take your things and go stay somewhere else for a bit. We'll talk when things cool down." I stood there staring at the door like it was a prank that went too far. I called her again. It went to voicemail. I called again. Straight to voicemail. I heard the cat scratch at the window from inside. And then I heard voices, a man's voice low, and her voice sharper than usual. And then the sound stopped like someone turned on a TV to cover it. I picked up my suitcase and carried it to my trunk, then my backpack, then the bins. I didn't know what else to do. I wasn't going to kick the door in, and I wasn't going to stand on the porch begging to get into the place I paid for. I loaded everything I could, and then I just sat in my car, hands on the steering wheel, staring at our front door. It wasn't just that no one was inside. It was the fact she had decided on her own that I could be locked out of my home, that my stuff could be placed on the curb like I was some roommate who didn't pay rent, and she could do it with one text. I drove to my friend Devin's apartment. Devin's 29 and lives alone. He opened the door, looked at my suitcase, and didn't ask questions right away. He just said, "Couch is yours. Talk when you want." That night, Tessa didn't contact me again. Around midnight, she sent one text. "Please don't do anything stupid. I'm exhausted. We'll talk tomorrow." I didn't respond. I didn't sleep much. I kept thinking about what was still inside my computer, my tools, my paperwork folder with my car title and passport, and the bigger problem, the lease. Because the lease is in my name. That part is important, and it's where Tessa really messed up. When we moved in, her credit had a bunch of late payments from a medical bill issue, and the property manager told us straight up they'd approve me alone, but not her alone. They could add her as an occupant and co-signer later after 6 months of on-time payments. But the initial contract would be under me. Tessa was embarrassed about it, and I didn't rub it in. It wasn't some power thing. It was just how we got approved. She paid her half of everything. We live like equals, but on paper, I'm a leaseholder, and all utilities are in my name too, because it was easier when we set it up. So when she locked me out, she didn't just lock me out as a boyfriend. She locked me out as the legal tenant in a house where she was an approved occupant, and she did it while letting an unapproved person move in. I got up early the next morning and called the property management office as soon as they opened. I asked for the manager, a woman named Ms. Patel, and I kept my voice calm. I told her I'm a leaseholder at the townhouse on Cedar Row. I was locked out last night. Locks changed without permission. My belongings were put outside, and there's an unauthorized occupant inside. She went silent for a second, then asked, "Are you safe?" I said, "Yes, I'm safe, but I need access to my home, and I need to document what's happening before anything goes missing." She asked if I could come to the office with ID and a copy of the lease. I said yes, and I drove over. Ms. Patel met me in the lobby. She had that look people get when they're already annoyed at someone, and you can tell they've decided who the problem is. But it wasn't me. It was the person who caused the headache. She pulled up my account, confirmed I was the leaseholder, and asked if I'd authorized a lock change. I said no. She asked if I'd given anyone permission to add another adult occupant. I said no. Then she said, "Okay, this is a violation of the lease, and also if you're locked out, we need to handle it immediately. Do you want to proceed with a formal complaint and entry notice?" I asked what that meant. She said they would post a notice, require access, and if necessary, they could involve their legal department. She also said if I wanted police there for a civil standby while I retrieved belongings, I could arrange that myself, but they would absolutely send maintenance to rekey the lock back to the legal tenant. I asked if she could do it today. She said maintenance could be there in a few hours. I sat in my car outside their office and finally texted Tessa, "I'm coming by with management and maintenance to get access to the house. I'm getting my documents and the rest of my belongings. Do not touch anything of mine." She replied, "You're being dramatic. Nolan needs a place. You were going to freak out. I didn't have a choice. Just let us have a few days, please." I didn't respond. I drove back to Devin's and grabbed a couple storage bins for packing. Then I drove back to the townhouse and waited across the street where I could see the front door. Around noon, Nolan walked out. He was carrying a duffel bag. He looked around like he was checking for something. Then he got into Tessa's car, the driver's side, and drove off. Tessa came out a minute later. She picked up a couple of my things that were still on the curb, dragged them back toward the porch, and then went inside again. I saw enough. She hadn't just invited him. She'd handed him the keys to my life. At 1, Ms. Patel arrived with a maintenance guy. I walked up with him. Maintenance tried his master key. It didn't work, meaning the lock had been fully replaced, not just rekeyed. Ms. Patel knocked hard and said, "Property management, open the door." Tessa opened it halfway, and her face changed when she saw me standing there. She said, "What is this?" Ms. Patel said, "You changed the lock without authorization. You need to step aside. Maintenance is replacing it back to the leaseholder's key." Tessa tried to argue, saying there was a safety issue, and she felt threatened, and she had to protect herself. Ms. Patel asked if she had filed a police report. Tessa said no. Ms. Patel asked if there was a restraining order. Tessa said no. Ms. Patel asked if I had ever been violent. Tessa said no. Ms. Patel said, "Then you do not have authority to lock out the legal tenant." Tessa stared at me like I'd betrayed her and said, "I can't believe you're doing this." I said, "I can't believe you did it first." The maintenance guy replaced the lock. Ms. Patel watched like she'd done this 100 times. Tessa stood in the doorway with her arms crossed, shaking, not from fear, from anger. When the door opened, I walked in and went straight to our bedroom. My dresser drawers were open. My closet was half empty. My laptop bag wasn't where it belonged, and my document folder was gone. I turned back to Tessa and said, "Where's my folder?" She said, "I don't know what you mean." I said, "The folder with my passport and my car title. It was on the top shelf." She said, "Maybe you moved it. You're always losing things." I didn't raise my voice. I said, "I didn't move it. I want it back right now." She stepped back and said, "You're scaring me." Ms. Patel looked at her and said, "If items are missing, that's not a lease issue. That's a police issue." Tessa's face went pale, and she said, "It's not missing. I just put it somewhere safe because I didn't want you taking everything and leaving me with nothing." I said, "It's mine. Give it to me." She walked to the kitchen, opened a cabinet above the fridge, and pulled out my folder. I took it and set it in my bag. Then I started packing. Not everything, just my things, my clothes, my computer, my tools, my kitchen stuff I had bought, the coffee machine my sister gave me, the TV I paid for, the bar stools I bought, the bed frame I bought, and a mattress we split. I wasn't going to drag a mattress downstairs in front of Ms. Patel. I wasn't trying to perform anything. I just wanted out. Tessa followed me around saying, "You're really going to do this after everything over a few days?" I said, "It's not over a few days. It's over you deciding I can be removed from my own home without a conversation." Then she said it, the thing that made everything click into place. She said, "Nolan said you'd do this. He said you were the kind of guy who thinks he owns me because his name is on the lease." I stopped and looked at her. I said, "Nolan said that." She hesitated. I said, "So you two were talking about me, about how I'd react before I ever even got home?" She didn't answer. Ms. Patel cleared her throat and said, "I'm going to document today's entry, and I'm going to file an incident report if there's an unauthorized occupant here. He needs to be gone. If he returns, it will trigger eviction proceedings for lease violations. Do you understand?" Tessa nodded like a kid caught stealing. Ms. Patel handed me a card with her email and said, "If you want to terminate the lease early due to this lockout situation, contact me. Otherwise, we can discuss removing occupants and updating the lease, but this cannot happen again." I said, "Thank you," and she left. After she left, the house felt smaller, like all the air had been used up by the fight. I carried my bags in my car, 2 trips, 3 trips, 4, and during the 5th trip, Nolan came back. He walked up the sidewalk like he belonged there, holding a drink carrier and a grocery bag. He saw me and smiled like it was funny. He said, "Hey man, didn't know you'd be here." I didn't answer. I kept walking. He said, "You can relax. I'm not trying to steal your girlfriend. We're just friends. She needed help, you know?" I put my bag in the trunk, closed it, and looked at him. I said, "You're in a house you're not on the lease for. You're driving a car that isn't yours, and you're talking to me like we're buddies. Stop." His smile tightened. He said, "She told me you were dramatic." Tessa came out behind him and said, "Nolan, please don't." Then Nolan did something that told me exactly why he was there. He said, "Tess, just tell him. He's already doing all this. Just tell him the plan." She snapped, "Stop saying that." I looked at her. I said, "What plan?" She said, "There is no plan." Nolan said, "You said you needed a reset. You said you wanted him out for a week, and then you decide." She said, "He's twisting it. He's making it sound worse." I said, "You changed the lock, put my stuff outside, hid my documents, and let him drive your car, explain how it's not worse." She started crying, real tears, and said, "I didn't know what else to do. I was tired of walking on eggshells with you." I said, "You weren't walking on eggshells with me. You were walking on eggshells with him, and you just brought that in my life." She said, "Please just stay somewhere else a few days. Let Nolan leave, then we can talk like adults." I said no. I finished loading my car. Then I did the one thing I came prepared to do, because I knew she'd try to turn it into a conversation where she convinced me to wait and delay and calm down until I was back under her roof and Nolan had more time to settle in. And then I'd be the bad guy for throwing him out. So before I came back to the townhouse, I wrote an envelope. Inside it was a letter, short and plain, and copies of 3 things: the lease, the utility bills in my name, and the incident report number Ms. Patel gave me, plus a printed photo of my stuff on the curb from the night before with the timestamp, and a written notice that I was ending the relationship effective immediately, and that any communication would go through email only for logistics, and that Nolan was not allowed to contact me at all. I also included a notice that I had already scheduled the utilities to be transferred off my name within 72 hours, and that the property manager had been informed about an unauthorized occupant, and any attempt to lock me out again would be handled through law enforcement. That was it. No insults, no dramatic lines, no threats that weren't real, just a paper trail and a boundary she couldn't talk around. I walked to her car, put the envelope under the driver's side wiper, the one Nolan had been using, then I walked back to my car. Tessa said my name like she wanted me to stop. Nolan said, "Wow, you're really doing this." I got in, started the engine, and drove away. Update, 9 hours later. Tessa called me 8 times in a row, then texted me from a different number, then emailed me. Her email was long. She said she panicked. She said she didn't mean for it to go that far. She said Nolan was leaving the next morning. She said she'd give me space too. She said she didn't want to lose what we had. She said she'd do couples therapy. She said she'd do anything. I didn't respond to the calls. I replied to the email with one sentence. Please confirm you return my document folder and that you will not enter my storage unit. Then I sent the address for Devin's place as a temporary mailing address for any paperwork. She replied quickly. I returned it. I swear, I'm sorry. At 8 p.m., Ms. Patel emailed me. She said she had spoken directly with Tessa, and Tessa admitted Nolan was staying there. Ms. Patel told her he had to leave immediately or the lease would be terminated for violation. Ms. Patel asked me if I wanted to continue the lease alone at a different occupant or terminate with an agreed move-out date. I asked Ms. Patel if there was an option where I could terminate with minimal penalty due to being illegally locked out, and she said yes. They could treat it as a safety and tenancy issue, but I need to sign a release, and Tessa would need to qualify on her own if she wanted to stay. I agreed to terminate. I told her I'd come the next day to sign. Ms. Patel offered to schedule a civil standby time window for me to pick up the rest of my things if I wanted, or I could hire movers. She said they could also do a walkthrough with me to document conditions since the lease was in my name. At 10 p.m., Nolan texted me from Tessa's phone. One message: stop trying to ruin her life. You're not a victim. That was the last straw for any chance of being civil outside of formal channels, because he had her phone, meaning he was already planted in her life again, like before, like she claimed she hated, and she was letting it happen. I forwarded that text to Ms. Patel and asked her to note that the unauthorized occupant was using Tessa's phone to contact me and harass me. Then I filed a police report for illegal lockout and document concealment. The officer told me most of it was civil, but they documented it, and they told me to keep all messages. Around midnight, Tessa emailed again. She said Nolan grabbed her phone as a joke, and he'd stop, and she'd make him stop, and she just wanted me to come home. I didn't respond. At 2 a.m., Devin woke me up and said, "Your phone keeps lighting up, you okay?" I showed him everything, and he said, "Don't go back there alone. Whatever you do, don't go back alone." Update: 3 months later. The lease termination went through 2 weeks after the lockout. Ms. Patel scheduled a final walkthrough with me. She documented the condition of the townhouse, and she issued my portion of the security deposit refund to me directly because the lease was in my name, and she noted the lockout incident in the file. Tessa tried to stay, but she didn't qualify on her own, and she asked her sister to co-sign. Her sister refused. The property management gave her a move-out deadline, and when Nolan was still there past the deadline, they filed for eviction. Tessa moved out before the court date to avoid having an eviction on her record. Nolan didn't help her pack. He left a week earlier without warning, according to Tessa's sister, who messaged Devin's girlfriend, because apparently the story made it around our friend's circle fast. I got the rest of my stuff out with movers and a police civil standby. Nothing was damaged, but a few smaller items were missing, a tool set and a pair of headphones. I didn't fight about it. I documented it and moved on. I didn't want another reason to be pulled back into contact. Tessa tried to see me twice, once outside my office building and once at a grocery store near Devin's place. I walked away both times. She sent one final email saying she understood and she was sorry, and I didn't reply. I moved into a one-bedroom apartment closer to work, utilities in my name, lease in my name, no shared accounts, no shared furniture. I kept it simple. Last week, I saw Nolan's name pop up on my phone again in a block call notification. I didn't answer. I emailed myself a screenshot and saved it with the rest of the file. Then I went back to what I was doing. That envelope was the last conversation. Everything after was paperwork, deadlines, and distance. And the house that used to feel like our place stopped being my problem the second I drove away. And it stayed that way.